Thank you very much for that. So my presentation, I was going to talk about what I saw as the key issues and how I saw projects. Mostly, obviously, as Steve said, it's over the border, so in England on the projects I've worked on. But a lot of my points have actually already been covered, showing how they're actually doing it correctly in Scotland and also what we can learn. But I'll still pick out the ones that I think are key, and I'll hopefully not drone on too long. So for me, it's around looking at sort of three key issues and what the perceived costs of OLE, but also how these can very quickly escalate and increase the costs. So it's been mentioned before around the access and route clearance, but I'm going to labour those parts a bit more, but also talk a bit about machinery and staffing levels. So talking on access, we need to look at, and it was mentioned in one of the earlier presentations, around the time we actually get. Do we get midweek nights? And if we do, we've been quite lucky on some of ours. We got four hours working time, so slightly better than up here where they were only getting 2. But, can we get rid of the first and last train to do that doubling of the time? That means that we're doubling our production, but we can then also reduce the duration of the project potentially, which reduces the prelims and things like that because the project's over quicker. It was mentioned briefly again. If there aren't people on those trains, do we need to pay those Schedule 4 costs for those trains if we can cancel them? Commuting has changed. We can't get away from it. I certainly work from home now. I don't commute. I commute once in a blue moon, but, and I think a lot of people are like that. So there are different times, but equally, it was also said, is the weekend the best time for the big blockades? Do we want the weekend working? Do we want to close the railway on a Tuesday and Wednesday to have our 27 54-hour blockades? Again, I don't know, but that's a conversation that needs to be had with the TOCs and FOCs if we want them. I jump about a bit because I'm just trying to give the key things that I see are critical to cost, and also when you're planning your access, do you get the construction contractor on early enough to ask them what machines they're using, or have that strategy there, that robust strategy? As you know, I came from GWEP, so I had quite a lot to do with the HOPS train down on GWEP. There were advantages and disadvantages to that. The ALO on it was brilliant. It meant we got some really good midweek nights because the TOC could run the trains on the adjacent line open by die. So we could get decent working midweek. Also, the physical barrier really gave that security feeling for the safety to the guys. And it could carry the materials. There's a picture there showing it carrying the cantilevers. And it was a good system. However, if you don't lock down the structure types when you order these materials, and the structures start to grow and grow, can the hops carry enough material? It's all very well getting your nice 8-hour possession. If you've only got materials for 3 hours, does it matter? So it is about getting that control of the size of the materials and making sure the machines that people order for the works that they're doing can actually carry enough materials to site. Another advantage is you take the possession around it so you don't have the travel time. Moving on to sort of conventional equipment, and linked to that, materials for that, there's pros and cons for both, but you have to wait for the possession, put your machines on, load your machines, then travel to site. How far are your wraps apart? Some of our routes, we had wraps that were 15 miles apart. That was a lot of travel at the beginning of your possession and at the end of your possession. So then do you need to look at putting in additional wraps if you're going to use conventional kit? And what land does that take? And do you need to buy land from landowners, or do Network Rail have it? And are the compounds big enough to hold all those machines while you're thinking about that? And this all needs to be thought early because it can still very quickly add costs. For me, I think both types of equipment work in the right facility. So you want the high output in the open route stuff that's repetitive, but potentially in more complex areas, you might go conventional. Generally in the complex areas, there's already good RAP access anyway in compounds, so you can utilise the existing facilities. Jumping onto that, there's the staffing levels. Construction contractors, we're not going to spend money if we don't know where the next project is, or if we can't keep our staff utilised. If we only get 1 shift a week or 2 shifts a week, are we going to have full-time staff, or are we going to go to the labour market and get ad hoc weekend warriors? They absolutely have their place, but are they as efficient as staff that you can train up on your route and on your equipment? Probably not. So you can get efficiencies. You know, ideally, we would have maybe 4 shifts a week. That would keep their contracted hours busy, but we need them busy for their whole shift. That also allows us to train them as well, so that they can become sort of more flexible in what they can do within the OLE systems. But we won't do that if we can't see the next project. So up here in Scotland, it looks like they've got the rolling programme and they can see that. So you don't finish a job and then disband it. If you look at where the hops guys have gone, we've trained them up really well. And we trained them in the conventional, so when hops wasn't out running, they were going out supporting the conventional guys. They've all disbanded to other projects, other countries, other industries. You know, yes, some of them are still in OLE, but they're not working as an efficient team anymore. And that's been lost because the next project wasn't there. And while I'm on staffing and training, I think we need to also, as an industry, look at OLEC trainers. You know, we worked at OLEC, which is really good because it gives us, when we employ people, if they're existing linesmen, an understanding of their capability. We will then need to train them on the project. At the moment, there are only, let me get my numbers right, 13 OLEC 3s and 11 OLEC 2 trainers, and 11 OLEC 3 trainers in the country, and I mean in the UK, registered with NSER. And of those, by 2030, 64% of the OLEC 3 trainers will have hit retirement age. So what are we going to do to hit the numbers of staff we need to get the decarbonisation and the number of linesmen we need? If we want to hit all this decarbonisation, we absolutely need to start thinking about how can we bring young blood into the training world. Next, the obvious costs that escalate very quickly are route clearance works. I've got this slide up here about the big ticket items, which most people think about, which is the bridge interventions and what can be done. I think, if I'm honest, it's been covered nicely today by people, so I'm going to skip over that. But what people also tend to forget in the costs is the other route clearance stuff, so the immunisation of other assets, but also canopy cutbacks at stations. Do we need to do it to get through the stations? Are they listed? Do you need to go and get consents? That all adds delay potentially into your programme, and it needs to be done much further out. Also, things like signalling. I've had projects where you've got stung. So it's an electrification project. But the available reading distance is a lot less than the minimum reading distance required. So while you're there, could you put that banner in? We need to get everyone's buy-in to minimum viable product. We are electrification projects. We are not there to rectify other non-conformances or new non-conformances because the standards changed. So historically it was compliant and now it's not. But that's not our project to correct. But it's getting all the stakeholders buy-in at every stage so that they understand that. While we're there, the stakeholder might say, here's some money and do it because you're already there. That's a different matter and can potentially be negotiated, but you don't want to rectify other people's issues if we can avoid it. And we do need to keep the costs down and get to that minimum viable product. I'm going to briefly touch on design because I know Gary will go into it in much more detail than me. There's a couple of things that I think for me are critical, and it was discussed earlier about finding out where the OLE foundation is, so getting those surveys done early, getting the locations locked down because that says what your steel size is. You know, if you can lock that and get a standard walkout of your structures and you know you've got STCs, you can continue with your machine ordering and get those done while the detailed design is being completed. However, if it suddenly all changes to TTCs, that massively increases the costs, both from a construction point of view and a materials point of view. So if we can get those surveys done early, brilliant. Likewise, the detailed surveys of the bridges, nail the route clearance, get it done and get them out of the way. So when OLE come in to do the installation, we've got a clear route in the access. We're not having to work around other disciplines because they're still busy getting the route clearance done. We want to get in there and do the production methodology of installation without people getting in our way. And my last point around design is let's standardise. How many times have we reinvented the wheel? How many times has the same Form 1 and Form 3 been issued for a foundation design because it's had to be rebadged because it's been used on a different route, and now we want to use it on, you know, it was used on Midland Main Line and now it wants to be used in Wales, so we've got to rebadge it because it's not in the design range. Why are we doing that? And if it's by a different company, they need to also do all the calculations that back it up. It's ridiculous paying for that thing twice when it's already been proven and accepted on a route. Let's drive to get all of these things put in the range and highlighted which are best practice so that everyone knows what the best practice is. And similarly with foundations in stations, what is the right solution? To bury them or not to bury them? But I've spent hours in meetings discussing it and then rediscussing it on a different route. Can we not have you can't have a one-size-fits-all because there will be the 2% of locations that it doesn't fit, but surely 98% of locations there should be one solution that all the RAMs and the TOCs agree on or have been told by Central Network Rail. Because it stops that debate and that preferential engineering and that gold standard when a standard solution will work. So in summary, for me, it's about getting the right machine for the right access, but stop the famine to feast. Construction contractors absolutely, like they've got in Scotland, need that rolling programme so we know where we're going. So as soon as the foundations are finished in one area, the design's already on the table and the surveys have been done and the foundations start in the next area while the OLE is going on so that we don't get skill fade. And that will encourage as well bringing in new blood. Because if we know we've got 2 years of work, 3 years of work, what's to stop us bringing in this new blood and training them up and gradually getting them through all the various stages of ALEC? And that's me.